But this is based off a post on the Delphi murders subreddit, which was very, very interesting. It's posted by Kristen D. 1031 the other week. Confirmation bias. Could this be hampering Abby and Libby getting justice? And I thought this post was very, very interesting because it not only pertains to this Delphi case, but many other cases. And I talk about them on the Mindshock podcast all the time. Various cases, the Maura Murray case, just making these stacks of cards, these houses of cards based on assumptions. But let me read this post here. Confirmation bias. Could this be hampering Abby and Libby getting justice? To be able to answer this question, we must first look at what confirmation bias is. Where do your beliefs and opinions come from? If you're like most people, you feel that your convictions are rational, logical, and impartial based on the results of years of experience and objective analysis of the information you have available. Well, certain people do that, others don't. And that's where Dunning-Kruger comes in, but that's a whole nother topic. In reality, all of us are susceptible to a tricky problem known as confirmation bias. Our beliefs are often based on paying attention to the information that upholds them, while at the same time tending to ignore information that challenges them. Like, of course, the cult of authority worship. There's a lot of goofs out there that think that law enforcement are infallible or close to infallible, and that they aren't mistaken, innocent people aren't in prison, and all of these things. Understanding confirmation bias. A confirmation bias is a type of cognitive bias that involves favoring information that confirms your previously existing beliefs or biases. For example, imagine that a person holds a belief that left-handed people are more creative than right-handed people. Whenever this person encounters a person that is both left-handed and creative, they place greater importance on this evidence that supports what they already believe. This individual might even seek proof that further backs up this belief while discounting examples that don't support the idea. Confirmation biases impact how we gather information, but they also influence how we interpret and recall information. For example, people who support or oppose a particular issue will not only seek information to support it, they will also interpret news stories in a way that upholds their existing ideas. They will also remember details in a way that reinforces these attitudes. Confirmation biases in action. Consider the debate over gun control. Let's say Sally is in support of gun control. She seeks out news stories and opinion pieces that reaffirm the need for limitations on gun ownership. When she hears stories about shootings in the media, she interprets them in a way that supports her existing belief. And that, of course, presupposes that controlling legal gun owners would somehow prevent criminals, which, of course, all worldwide stats shows the opposite. Henry, on the other hand, is adamantly opposed to gun control. He seeks out news sources that are aligned with the position. When he comes across news stories about shootings, he interprets them in a way that supports his current point of view. These two people have very different opinions on the same subject, and their interpretations are based on their beliefs. Even if they read the same story, their bias tends to shape the way they perceive the details, further confirming their beliefs. Now, the one thing that's really, really missing from this article here is, of course, logical fallacies. Because this is a way to objectively determine what is being talked about or believed has a basis in reality, or if it's fallacious. Now, obviously, there's also the logical fallacy, which, of course, just because something is a logical fallacy doesn't mean it's untrue. But it gives you objectivity, so you don't have to cling desperately to blind faith that limiting legal gun ownership would somehow impact gun crime. Again, worldwide stats, you can look at them for the past 100 years. They're pretty clear. And so that's what a faith-based presupposition is, or a circular reasoning logical fallacy, where you're assuming something is true before the fact and then using certain justifications to back that when your foundation is false. And again, cognitive biases have obviously a role to play in that. The impact of confirmation bias. In the 1960s, cognitive psychologist Peter Cathcart-Wason conducted a number of experiments known as Wason's rule discovery task. He demonstrated that people have a tendency to seek information that confirms their existing beliefs. Unfortunately, this type of bias can prevent us from looking at situations objectively. It can also influence the decisions we make and lead to poor or faulty choices. During an election season, for example, people tend to seek positive information that paints their favored candidates in a good light. They will also look for information that casts the opposing candidate in a negative light. By not seeking out objective facts, interpreting information in a way that only supports their existing beliefs, and only remembering details that uphold these beliefs, they often miss important information. These details and facts might have otherwise influenced a decision on which candidate to support, of course, presupposing that either candidate is eligible. Again, the black and white logical fallacy or false dichotomy there. Both guys most probably are scumbags, because what kind of people are attracted to politics? But anyway, expert observations. In his book, Research in Psychology, Methods and Design, C. James Goodwin gives an example of confirmation bias as it applies to extrasensory perception. Persons believing in extrasensory perception, ESP, will keep close track of instances when they were thinking about mom and then the phone rang and it was her. Yet they ignore the far more numerous times when A, they were thinking about mom and she didn't call, and B, they weren't thinking about mom and she did call. But how many people actually log all of it? Number one. Number two, again, this is all based on the false dichotomy logical fallacy, because ESP could be real and, of course, have absolutely nothing to do with this individual because they don't have ESP. So regardless of whether they were or weren't thinking about their mother when she called, it wouldn't be applicable in this situation, but that doesn't mean ESP is not real. Again, this is why logical fallacies are important. They also fail to recognize that if they talk to mom about it every 2 weeks, their frequency of thinking about mom will increase near the end of the 2-week interval, thereby increasing the frequency of a hit. Which is also true. However, if they do have ESP, why would they not be on a schedule with their mother? They could have ESP and still be on a phone schedule with their mother, correct? So again, this is why logical fallacies are important to understand. As Catherine A. Sanderson points out in her book, Social Psychology, confirmation bias also helps form and reconfirm stereotypes we have about people. We also ignore information that disputes our expectations. We are more likely to, and I'm just going to interject with another point here, very, very often, people are correct about something, but for the wrong reason. So this is where cognitive biases like confirmation bias and all these things, they can start to build this house of cards, not because the person is wrong along the way, but the person is accidentally correct because they're correct, but not for the reason they think they are, which increases their false belief, and these are a lot of red herrings in a way. That's what ends up happening. Also important to keep in mind, but that's why people listen to Mindshock, because logic and reason is at the forefront here. Not assuming and hallucinating one theory is more likely to be true than another without having enough information, or hallucinating that there is enough information to make those determinations, because most of the time there is not. We also ignore information that disputes our expectations. We are more likely to remember and repeat stereotype consistent information and to forget or ignore stereotype inconsistent information, which is one way stereotypes are maintained even in the face of disconfirming evidence. If you learn that your new Canadian friend hates hockey and loves sailing, and your new Mexican friend hates spicy foods and loves rap music, you are less likely to remember this new stereotype inconsistent information. Some people would say that, I don't know about that, some people would say the opposite, because they would remember the person. Because if this Canadian hates hockey, all their other Canadian friends like hockey, they would remember, oh, that's the Canadian that doesn't like hockey, because it doesn't confirm. Again, important to keep these things in mind. Confirmation bias is not only found in our personal beliefs, it can affect our professional endeavors as well. In the book Psychology, Peter O. Gray offers this example of how confirmation bias may affect a doctor's diagnosis. Groupman points out that the confirmation bias can couple with the availability bias in producing misdiagnoses in a doctor's office. And of course, doctors are actually one of the leading causes of death. A lot of people don't know that. A doctor who has jumped to a particular hypothesis as to what disease a patient may have may then ask questions and look for evidence that tends to confirm that diagnosis while overlooking evidence that would tend to disconfirm it. Groupman suggests that medical training should include a course in inductive reasoning that would make new doctors aware of such biases. Awareness, he thinks, would lead to fewer diagnostic errors, or just basic logic. A good diagnostician will test his or her initial hypothesis by searching for evidence against the hypotheses. And how often do people want to think they're wrong? That's where the ego comes into play, which of course we have to keep in mind as well. Unfortunately, we all have confirmation bias. Even if you believe you are very open-minded and only observe the facts before coming to conclusions, it's very likely that some bias will shape your opinion in the end. It's very difficult to combat this natural tendency, unless, of course, you don't hallucinate the need to come to any conclusion if you can recognize that not enough information is available to come to any conclusion. So this was an article from verywellmind.com. what is confirmation bias. So this post here on the Abby and Libby subreddit posted this article and then the follow-up thoughts here. I believe it is probable that confirmation bias has definitely had an impact on this case. Perhaps when law enforcement said, "We made mistakes in the beginning," it is very revealing just this kind of situation. They may have looked in one direction because of confirmation bias and discounted evidence, or a witness statement or tip that would have sent them in one direction and instead, based on their bias, took a completely different approach. Whatever may have happened, we all know that hindsight is 20/20. I would like to think that we can all try to be better at listening to opposing views more and really hone in what others have to say regarding this case. Looking at information or other viewpoints in the case can only help better understand not only the fact that we all have confirmation bias, but that we acknowledge it and try to wade past it. Okay. Some posts here. Well, I can say the cops effed it up. Bridge guy might not be local, but knows the trails once or a few times before. What if he has gone through some kind of bad times, like a breakup in his life, saw the girls were dropped off, followed them to the end of the bridge as he had already been there and aware of the area, and has no specific intention but to follow them and decide what to do with them and creep them out, and somehow ended up killing them? Don't you think he also got hurt while trying to kill two girls? Why is it taking so long to arrest if Bridge Guy's local? How many people live there under that age group who fits killer profile? Overall, cops effed it up and made this a cold case. On top of that, they don't want to release more info. If you follow it from the beginning, cops released Bridge Guy's voice, then pic, and then video. WTF. Another post here. I think this is one of the easy cases to solve if cops handled it well. I mean, there's a lot of good points here, especially if we don't even know for certain where the video came from. The trail cams, if you haven't listened to the trail cam video podcast, just some conflicting information at the beginning. I mean, there's conflicting information every step of the way in this case, which is weird because you don't see that in every case. Sure, some cases you see that with bumbling cops, but in a lot of cases there is no conflicting information. It's simply accurate every step of the way, whether there's a lot of it or not. In some cases there's not a lot of information, but it's not conflicting, it's consistent. Another good post here. I think confirmation bias is hampering many private citizens' view of the case and evidence. This is unfortunate. It has the bad consequences of innocent people's lives disrupted or ruined, piles of tedious speculation fest, screeds on social media, and likely aggravated mental health problems for folks who are too invested and triggered about the Delphi murders. I cannot have an opinion on whether it hinders the investigation. There aren't enough drop-dead ambiguous for 5 years facts to base an opinion on. Writing that last, I am considering if that argues the contrary, that the investigation does not suffer from too much confirmation bias and its cousin groupthink. Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points there as well.